The history and culture of African tribes. It has not been so easy for researchers to gain concrete history of the African tribe based on its scarcity. Most incidents were narrated orally, and since it wasn't documented, many find it so hard to peruse some facts about the AFR past and happenings. Meanwhile, the recorded history of early civilization began from Egypt and spread to Nubia, Maghreb, and the Horn of Africa. During the Middle Age, Islamic religion spread throughout Africa, and they are meant to be the dominant region in northern Africa. The Europeans and Arabs took slaves from parts of Africa and shipped them to overseas to use them as slave trade. This happened in the 15th century. From the 19th and 20th century, the Europeans gave full hand in colonizing some parts of Africa. The enraptured Second World War that created the emergence of the European. Weakening and decolonization has its way. The culture of Africa is incredibly so fascinating. Though it varies depending on the country every individual chooses to visit. Africa is a home of a diverse population, and they are not only groomed by internal dealings, there are some elements of external influence on them. Each country has its own tribes, languages, and culture. All these are done and practiced differently. The country you might look down upon as the smallest one among the African countries, just like Uganda, has their own way of living. The established products of African culture are based on food, art, and language, which shall be discussed later on. Let's put into consideration the famous African tribes. The Zulu of South Africa are the largest ethnic group. They lived in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. They are estimated to be more than 12 million people. In the 20th century, the Zulu and other parts of South Africa suffered what we called apartheid. The Zulu also suffered much during this period. The Maasai resides in the valley called Rift Valley region in Kenya and Tanzania. They are meant to be cattle readers, training so many livestock and always been in search for good greener pasture and water. Most of their wealth is based on cattle. Respect and power is accorded to the person who has a lot of cattle. There is also another interesting tribe to be a place of visit called the Omo tribe. They have an interesting culture to learn about. Other famous tribes one can take cognizance of are Dogon in Mali, Karo in Ethiopia, Himba in Namibia, Maasai in Kenya and Tanzania, Pygmies in Central Africa, Wadabe in Niger and Chad, and Yoruba in Nigeria. All these have their customs and traditions they believe and practiced, which are passed to the next generation. African food, the people living in eastern, southern and western regions of Africa are farmers. What keeps and sustains their living comes from farming they got devoted to. Most of these traditional food cultivated are sold outside their jurisdiction. In Algeria and Morocco, they usually serve dishes with meat and vegetables. The Western African region grows and consumes crops like cassava, cowpea, maize, millet, and plantains. African country is blessed with numerous nutritional food, and because of the multiple food variety, many people are longing to be part of them. The girls in Africa are very good at carrying up their task when it comes to the aspect of cooking. Some countries and tribes are affected with the white men inculcated way of meal taking, a situation where some traditional food is blended to match with their own demands. African art Africans have solemnly contributed to sculptural works. The art form of Africa sculpture is back thousands of years, which are meant to be the products of the earliest sculptures being discovered or found in Egypt today. African language, the indigenous languages and dialects spoken in Africa are very many. The countries in Africa have their languages. Even the smaller ones are not left out. Even when we discover that Africa is part of the European colonies, yet that didn't stop them from speaking their unified language. Their languages are used alongside the Pidgin or Creole version of English, Portuguese or French. Arabic is mostly spoken in Northern Africa, while Swahili dominates the East Africa countries. In conclusion, Africa is really a fascinating place to be. Most of their culture is so interesting to pull one's attention for a visit and physical entertainment. The art form of Africa sculpture is back thousands of years, which are meant to be the products of the earliest sculptures being discovered or found in Egypt today. African language, the indigenous languages, and dialects spoken in Africa are very many. The countries in Africa have their languages. Even the smaller ones are not left out. even when we discover that Africa is part of the European colonies. Yet that didn't stop them from speaking their unified language. Their languages are used alongside the Pidgin or Creole version of English, Portuguese or French. Arabic is mostly spoken in Northern Africa, while Swahili dominates the East Africa countries. In conclusion, Africa is really a fascinating place to be. Thanks for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more.